What's going on, CDL fans? We're here with our week 2 power rankings, or our post week 1 rankings. As you can see on screen, this is my preseason rankings, just to give you a baseline of where we started the season. And big shout out to TJ Finn, who commented on my last video requesting this video. So definitely making this specifically for you, TJ, but for anyone else that wants to see my rankings, we actually had 10 out of the 12 teams move their ranking from my preseason, so only 2 teams stay in the same spot. I think this is going to be really interesting, and let's hop into it. All right, so we're here on our blank rankings, and as you can see under me, we got a little bit of that news. Seattle, Atlanta, New York starting 2-0 is pretty good, and then Boston, LAG, LAT, and Minnesota starting 0-2. So we definitely had a nice mixture of teams winning and losing throughout this first weekend. And let's hop right into it with the first team, or the 12th team, and that is going to be the Minnesota Rocker, down 4 places from my preseason ranking. Personally, for me, I think the Rocker looked overall the worst team in the first week. Now, obviously, with this being only after 1 week of gameplay, teams aren't like, just because Surge were 2-0 doesn't mean they're jumping right up into the top 2. So there is going to be some sort of balance in adjusting these rankings. But for me personally, Minnesota looked the worst. They looked really bad in Search and Destroy in the first series. They looked really bad in Hardpoint in their second series. And that brings me to my team right ahead of them, which is LAG, who I actually have up 1 spot. I kind of thought LAG looked decent. I mean, they showed that they could actually compete. They almost beat the New York Subliners. They should have beat them in pretty much all 5 maps that they played. They, got 1 map win against Toronto Ultra. And overall, I actually thought LAG, despite also being 0-2 like the Minnesota Rocker, actually looked like they were able to compete pretty well. And if you are wondering, the Minnesota Rocker and the LA Gorillas both were 3-6 in their map count. So both of them have 33% win rate on map so far. Coming in to number 10 is none other than my Los Angeles Thieves. Definitely a bad showing in the first week, especially considering the coaches poll that Breaking Point did had them in the A tier with Optic, above Boston, above New York, above Seattle, all these teams. Had them as basically a top 4 team heading into the start of the season. So high expectations for Thieves. Definitely didn't live up to it. I said this on my podcast with Preston and Alex around the CDL. If you haven't watched that, episode 1 and 2 are on my channel. But one team every year is going to overexceed and one team is going to disappoint. And it seems that this season, LA Thieves are that team, at least to start, that are going to be the disappointing team, which sucks as an LA Thieves fan myself. I mean, they only won 1 map, which was a 3-0 in control that they won against Seattle. And other than that, I mean, they got 3-0'd by FaZe. Not a great start to this season. Hopefully they can bounce back in week 2. Then coming in at number 9, another team with high expectations at the start of the year. It is none other than Boston Breach, down 4 places. Boston, they didn't look terrible, right? I mean, they took FaZe to game 5. Overall, they did not look too bad. They too have a 33% map win rate, 3-6 record. But the thing is, this team had really high expectations. Going to the season on paper, everyone had them pretty much ranked as the 5th best team. I've had my doubts about this team since they formed. I feel like I love Slasher and Priesta. They know how to win. They're great leaders, things like that. They make the right plays. But I don't know if they have the slaying power as some of these other AR duos in the league. And I think especially in a game like MW3 with the high TTK, you really want an AR that's going to be able to slay out from the back. So I can see this team having some difficulties. Their Search and Destroy looked really bad, which is surprising because Slasher historically has good Search and Destroy teams. But overall, Snoopy and Capsule, I think, have looked solid. Snoopy's really been their bright spot. And I think this is a team that has a hard schedule and throughout the first qualifiers for Major 1. But I do think they will be a team that finds themselves in the running for champs by the end of the season. Now getting into our top 8. So in my opinion, if champs was to start right now, these would be my 8 teams in champs. At number 8, it is the Royal Ravens, up 3 spots from last week. Obviously, they're 1-1. They're only 3-5 in their map count right now. And all 3 of their wins came in that reverse sweep versus the Las Vegas Legion. Didn't look good in their first series. They got swept. But overall, I actually thought the Ravens showed some real fight. I thought each one of their players showed promise, especially Gwyn, who's my personal Rookie of the Year pick before the season started. I think he looked really good. Obviously, we saw the round 11 game 5 ace to seal the reverse sweep. But talking about the reverse sweep, I do have the team that they reverse sweep, the Vegas Legion, just ahead of them, down 1 spot from my previous ranking. I still like this Legion team. I still think, Attach and Nero looked really, really good. Standy looked good too. Purge, honestly, throughout the first week of the season, no offense to Purge, probably looked like the worst player in the league. His showing was not great. I think he has like a 0.6 overall right now, KD-wise. But I think this team looks exceptional in Search and Destroy, despite the game 5 that they lost to get reverse swept. I think they put up good fights. They are also 1-1 with a 5-5 map count. So Yes, the Ravens reverse swept them, so you could argue putting Ravens over them, but Ravens looked really bad in their first series against the Heretics when they got swept, and I thought Legion looked better in their first series, obviously being as they won. So just for that reason, I do have Legion one spot ahead of Ravens. Then coming in at number 6, we do have the Miami Heretics, a team that's up 3 spots from my last ranking. I didn't really know how to rank these guys, right? We hadn't seen 3/4 of their roster play on the professional level for 3 to 4 years now at this point. So not, high expectations for them, but they looked really, really good. Obviously, one of the 2 teams that only played 1 series, them and Toronto only did play 1 series. But I think that they looked really good. They won all 3 of their maps, so they have a 100% map win rate. They're currently undefeated in the league, maps and games. So really cool to see this Heretics team. I enjoyed watching them play, and I'm excited to see them continue to play. But like I said, if they were 2-0, they might be a little higher on this list. But because they're only 1-0, I put them up at 6, which is still pretty good. Now we get into our top 5, and I do have Seattle Surge, the biggest movers on this list, up 5 spots from 10 to 5 to start the season. I will say I underrated them to start the season. I didn't have high expectations. You had Illy coming off a year where he didn't really play. You had Arceus coming off the worst year of his career. Hook honestly looked pretty good. And you had Abuza, who was really good in challengers, but switching his role. I didn't have high expectations for them. I'm eating my words now. Big shout out to them for playing this good to start the year. I'm sure you could argue putting them in top 4, but being as it's only the first week, like I said in the beginning of the video, as the week progresses, this will balance better. But because it's only after 1 week, only after 2 matches max for all of these teams, I'm not going to have a team jump from 10 to top 3 just like that after 1 week. Yeah, Seattle looked incredible, and I'm excited to see them play because they play Optic and FaZe this coming weekend in week 2. So they have a tough matchup. They could very easily lose both of those and be 2-2, or maybe they could have 2 upsets and be 4-0. We will have to wait and see. Speaking of Optic Texas, I have them at number 4, staying at number 4. No change for them. Like I said, you could argue Seattle over Optic if you really want, because Seattle's 2-0, Optic's 1-1. But for me, Optic lost a Game 5 Round 11 to New York. They lost, they lost 3 Round 11s in total in all 3 of their Search and Destroys. But they were 1 round away from being 2-0. And honestly, I thought they looked good in the respawns. Once they clean up their Search and Destroy, they get some more VOD. They watch some of the other teams and learn more about strats that other teams are playing. I think they're going to be much better off. I don't think there's anything to overreact for this Optic team. And I still personally have them top 4. Now, let's get into our top 3. At number 3, I do have the Subliners down 1 spot from last week. This might seem harsh considering they are 2-0, but they honestly didn't look amazing in their 2 matches, right? They beat Optic in Game 5 Round 11. I mean, shout out to them for having the ice to win that series, of course. And then they also went to Game 5 against the LA Gorillas, where honestly, like I said earlier, for the Gorillas, they probably should have won all 5 maps in that series. You know what I mean? I think the Gorillas should have 3-0'd them. They just choked and they just didn't make the right plays. So, of course, NYSL, they had to play good. They had to ice up when it matters most to be 2-0 right now. But I just think, considering especially how they looked against the LA Gorillas, who were looked at as unanimously the worst team at the start of the year, I just knocked them down 1 spot. They're still top 3. It's still amazing. And they very well could end up in the top 2 again after this next week. So this is not to disrespect the Subliners. This is just, I personally think the teams above them should be above them. And I'll put both of those on screen now. It is the Toronto Ultra up 1 spot to number 2. And then FaZe still in number 1. Ultra, like I said, only played 1 match. They 3-1 LA Gorillas. So not the craziest opponent, but they looked really, really good. They were firing on all cylinders. All their players had their moments where they looked solid. Scrap actually was the only one on their team to go negative, and which is pretty crazy considering what we saw Scrap do last year. But if Scrap's the only one going negative and the rest of the team is frying the way they were, this team's gonna be dangerous throughout the year because obviously Scrap is gonna end up with a 1.15, 1.2 for this season at the end of it. And then on the Atlanta FaZe side of things, I mean, they is 6-2 map count as well, 75% win rate, 2-0 record. Their Atlanta FaZe, they looked really, really good. Simp looks like he's back in prime Simp form, MVP fashion. Obviously, increased TTK, higher skill gap. Simp is going to be one of the best in the game, and he's already proving that. But yeah, this is my full ranking for week 2 or post week 1, whatever you want to call it. Let me know what you think about this. What team do you agree with or disagree with? Definitely let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think. I personally think this is a pretty good ranking. As the weeks progress, we're going to be able to iron this out to really get teams into the range they should be in. And I'm excited to maybe do this every week and see how this changes as the weeks progress. If you want to see more CDL content, make sure to sub to the channel. That's mainly what I post here on the channel. Definitely listen to the podcast around the CDL that I do with my boys Alex and Preston. Episode 1 was really good. Episode 2 I thought was even better. We played a fun game of Who Would You Rather, Shotzi edition, picking players with Shotzi and who else. And then we also answered some community questions. So definitely sub for CDL content. And with all that being said, hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.